It's gonna yell at everybody that this meeting is being recorded. So welcome everybody. Before I share this again, thanks for coming to our, what do we call it? The second edition of doing a PhD in HCI, maybe technical HCI. There might be other things offered by the University of Michigan, the School of Information and Computer Science and Engineering. And maybe School of Education. I'm not sure how you're affiliated, but I wanted to introduce our two latest and newest and best incoming assistant professors. So we have with us Anhong and Shu today. So why don't you say a few words about yourselves and so introduce yourselves.
I will get started. And so hello everyone, I'm Wang. So I just graduated from the HCI PhD program at Carnegie Mellon University, and I will be joining the University of Michigan Cse Department in January next year. And my research interest is broadly in educational technologies. So I developed tools to support teaching and learning. And I became more interested in like teacher support tools. Like one line of work I'm actively pursuing now is AI augmented instructional design. So how can we leverage artificial intelligence and also crowdsourcing to support instructors designing their instructional materials. Yeah, and I'm more broadly interested in education technologies, learning sciences, CSW and CSEL. CSW is computer supported collaborative work and computer supported collaborative learning.
And hi everyone, my name is Anhong. I just also graduated from Carnegie Mellon in the Human Computer Interaction Institute. I work with Jeff Bigham, and I'm also joining the U Michigan Computer Science and Engineering next January. So before CMU, I did a master's for 2 years from 2012 to 2014 at Georgia Tech in the MHCI program. So if you have questions about CMU, Georgia Tech, Michigan, I'm happy to answer them. And yeah, I also happy to talk about a bunch of like open house experiences I had when I did grad school, things like that. And my research generally, I would say the core theme of it, I'm interested in how to combine human and machine intelligence in new ways to solve problems that are impossible or impractical with AI alone, and also too expensive or impractical with human computation alone. So like I've been actively kind of designing these kind of hybrid systems to solve problems in accessibility and environmental sensing. And recently I've been kind of more expanding that in kind of AI plus AR plus accessibility. So like finding the intersection in 2 or 1 or 3 of these keywords, kind of there are a lot of new opportunities that evolve. Yeah, so I'm happy to talk about those as well.
And
back to you, Michael.
Both are actively looking for PhD students that they can form and help grow and mentor. And so that would be all of you guys. So I'm Michael Nebeling, originally from Germany, and been in the US now for 5 years. And did my PhD at ETH Zurich in Switzerland. I studied both in Australia at Monash University for a year. So I have strong connections to Australia, to various kangaroos. I hope they're all still there, and koalas. And we've had some bad times there. And my undergraduate was actually in a degree called Media Computer Science at Ulm University. Now you may not have heard of Ulm, but you may have heard of Einstein. And so he was born in Ulm. And so they're very proud of that. And this Media Computer Science degree is what we now call human computer interaction, but it's really the technical side of it. And I think I've never lost that interest. So I made one good decision. I was choosing between a relatively close to home program, Ulm, that nobody knows about, or Technical University of Munich or Ludwig Maximilian University, Munich, which would have been a little bit further away from home. And I went for the underdog program, but I think it's stuck with me. And before joining Michigan, I was at CMU, and I actually worked on a project together with Anhong. So I know Anhong more than Shu, but Shu is now a colleague, and so that's why we're here. So we have actually a lot of things we can talk about. I think we have, all of us have friends all over North America, and then maybe also into Europe and Asia. But the PhD programs that I think understand the best are probably in just the US. There were some questions around that, how would you rank various programs, how much to pay attention to rankings anyway. One thing I think is it comes down to the people you want to work with. So key question is, how do you find those people? That's something we can explore together. So I did a similar PhD office hour last year, and I think it's still on Twitch. And a couple of things. So people have actually pointed out, it was watched by like 500 people or something, and it was really nice. People have pointed it out that it seemed helpful. I didn't have a lot of structure. I don't know that this is an improved version of it. We have many more questions than last time. So I have this whole document here of questions that were asked previously, and some of us tried to answer them already. Shu chimed in today and took some of the recent questions. I do think that, for example, iSchool versus CS programs is always a good one, because a lot of us are deciding, especially if you do technical HCI, why would you not want to join a computer science department, or how important is it to get a computer science degree? So I find that interesting. Personally, I'm very happy with being at the School of Information. You can call yourself the most technical person. So I'm doing augmented reality and virtual reality, and in some ways I'm not the most technical actually, but I'm quite technical in the School of Information. But when I walk over to Anhong and Shu's department, CSE, I'm the softie. I'm the softie over there. And that's how some people think about these things. And I think it's wrong. I think an iSchool is a very inclusive program. It's very eye-opening. I think my research has improved a lot over the last few years. At ETH, I was just building systems and tools and wanted to show the technical finesse, maybe, at least that's what I believed in. But I think the more recent work that I'm doing, obviously I've become a little better over the years. The more you do it, and the better you understand what really matters in these papers and in research. I've done incomplete systems now that can be studied in interesting ways. It's not just the programming that matters. And I talk about this very informally, and I have a more structured opinion about this as well. But I do think that the iSchool is a very, very good home for people. And even if you're technical, and I think a CS department sometimes gives you just more of the same. Now, Shu and Anhong are both joining CS, but CSE, but you're coming from the HCI Institute. So you kind of have iSchool PhDs in some sense, right? So was it difficult for you to get interviewed? So let's start with after the PhD. A lot of us are potentially doing PhDs to become maybe professors. So was it actually difficult to get interviews at these CSE environments?
I think it's mostly about the title, right? Like, even though like HCI feels like an iSchool, but it's still like under the School of Computer Science. So I think it doesn't affect our application to faculty that much. But like I applied for both iSchool and CS faculty positions. I think the title doesn't matter that much if like you find a faculty advisor as applying for a PhD program, as long as maybe like the faculty that the interest that align with you really well is in iSchool but not in CS, then like iSchool would be a better place for you, because you will find someone who you would love to work with. But I think like for Michigan in particular, I see there's a like joint program between CS and iSchool now. I think I've just heard about like there's a joint, like kind of a joint proposal, like students can write a proposal to do a define your, like kind of a DIY program to do a PhD program affiliated with both CSE and iSchool. So at least for Michigan, I don't think that would be a big issue. Like even if you are at you are a PhD student in CSE, but you want to do more like HCI type work, you can also affiliate with iSchool. And if you are a PhD student in iSchool, but you also want to do more like technical side of work, you can also affiliate with CSE. I think that the like finding the faculty match is kind of the most critical thing here. I don't.
Yeah, so who you work with and what you do is much more important than where you are. And whether it says CS, PhD, or iSchool, whatever PhD on your certificate. Okay, so I have I wanted to ask Anhong. Anhong, when people ask you how you find about these programs, like what do you usually, what is a good way to find to go about finding HCI programs?
Yeah. So I think this really changed a lot over the past number of years. I think like when I applied first in 2012, there were maybe some online articles and people talking about these different programs, and then I go to their websites and search. But now I would highly recommend csrankings.org, I think. So basically if you go up there, you can choose the disciplines, and if you basically filter down to HCI or maybe like look at the specific areas that you're interested in, and then you can also choose like based on number of publication, publication year range and kind of United States and Canada or like Europe or all over the world. And then you pretty much can get a feeling of like what are the most active faculty out there. But so there's a video down there by Philip Guo. I think it's very helpful to kind of go through the process of how do you use this tool to help you find faculty that you might be interested in working with. But one thing I want to point out is like this website and the faculty there are not super comprehensive, especially there are a lot of new faculty joining, and there are people who just graduated from they spent some time as a postdoc, and they're going to a new institution, and they have not been added to this system yet. So I would recommend you to do is, you can go through, the existing faculty here, and you can go to see who are their students and to see whether they have new students who just graduated and where they are going. So that's another great way of finding out new professors who are joining, because new professors will definitely be hiring more. I think that's a good way.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of flaws with this ranking. Obviously, I'm not the first, so that's like the biggest flaw in this ranking. Kidding. No. So when you look at CMU, I mean, that Chris Harrison is pretty high ranked, I get it, but that Brad Myers has like as many papers as me, I don't believe it. So I think it's clearly that something is really incomplete here and wrong. And a lot of the faculty actually complain about this now. And I've had students who like kind of like ask me, so why am I not doing so well on the ranking? And I'm like, come on. Anyway,
Actually,
so I wouldn't pay too much attention to the actual ranking of, like, I wouldn't read it as a ranking, like within the faculty, I think. But it's a good way to find people, like, right? I should be able to find like Florian's homepage, and then yeah, it's linked. And Mark, who does, I think he recently updated his page a little bit. He's actually now a full professor, so not too updated. That's the other problem, right? The more senior the professors, the less they care. Whereas us young ones kind of like try to keep our, but I can't find Anhong, right? I will not be able to find you right now.
Oh, we were just added to Michigan.
Oh, you should be there.
But you probably need to scroll down.
I'll find you.
No.
Anhong. Okay, I'll find Anhong. Yeah. And then let's see, go here. And yeah, you have a very nice page. Cool.
Very simple.
And so this picture is important, right? You immediately likable, want to work with this professor, and that's the first impression. That's really important. Cool.
So about CS rankings, two things to add. One is, Michael, if you scroll down to like the HCI area, so like if you open that, it basically only counted Chi, WIST, and Ubicon. So it didn't count the other HCI top conference like CSW, this, assets that, like for example, a lot of, for example, Brad Myers, he submitted a lot of papers to VLHCC and and other kind of software engineering kind of cross-cutting conferences. So I think this doesn't represent that, but this is a good place for you to get started, to figure out like what are the people, and then go dive in to what they're working on, who their students, and what their interested are, and things like that.
Well, let's look at, if we think of HCI, and then let's say this is probably just US. Then I think I'm not sure whether I agree with each of the numbers here in terms of the ranking, but I feel like I see most of the top places that I have in mind when I think, so I think UCSD should be much higher, to be honest. But anyway, MIT, this is just numbers. They're doing a really good job. Stanford is doing a really good job with low numbers. So yeah, wouldn't interpret this as, so you find the places, but I don't think it actually matches the mental model. I mean, I do think that the top four, I think they got right. Actually, that is kind of what I'm thinking in terms of presence and in technical HCI especially, which this is really geared towards this whole thing. If you look at CSEW, I think the ranking would look very, very different. Would probably potentially put us quite a bit higher as well. Anyway, so
another quick thing to add to this is if a faculty member has an industry affiliation, they are removed from this list. This is also like has some controversy, but if you scroll down here, Jeff is not included on this list because I think you have to have like 50% or like 70% appointment. And also from this list, for example, I know UCLA is growing. The HCI program is growing with two, primary HCI faculty, Anthony and Yang Jiang. They're joining. They're very strong technical HCI faculty. So they are not on this list. They didn't add themselves to this yet, but definitely check them out as well.
Yeah, I mean, the rising stars. I'm not sure whether I'm actually going to find him. Yeah, I will. So Yang as a friend, he's really good. And he chose UCLA, so he's studying there. And then Anthony Chen is already there. And I mean, we're just, Google Scholar is another way to potentially sometimes find people, but there are a lot of issues with Google Scholar as well, also regarding metrics and all that kind of stuff. So in any case, I wouldn't pay too much, it's a starting point, but don't read. What you shouldn't do is, the one thing you should really avoid is, let's say you find a guy here at Dartmouth, Xingdong, I really like Xingdong. And then you feel like, okay, we find like Anhong at Michigan. And then you're starting to compare through the ranking. Yeah, but if I join this person rather than that person, that means in the ranking I'm lower or something. I wouldn't think about that. The question is your match better with Anhong or with Xingdong? And then which one do you feel could be a better advisor for you? That's something you'll find out through interviews. And in any case, I think the strategy is to apply it to all these places in the first, if you can afford it, in the first round. You apply very broadly. I would not be too selective when you apply to PhD programs. So your homework is to find these people that are matches to you, Anint and Jen. So we know these names now. When I read a name like Jen Mankoff, I immediately think fabrication, accessibility. I know kind of like what they're working, cultural diversity, Katharina Reineck, John and Leah. I think two things. I think these are all really, really cool people. I really admire them a lot, and they're really strong colleagues. And also, I mean, I haven't actually really worked with them, but the way I meet them at conferences, the way I see them interact with people, to me suggests they're really nice, really, really super cool people to work with. I wish I could do another PhD with them. And the other thing I see is obviously how they're doing professionally, in terms they're very competitive. I mean, Jake is probably, okay, Shwetak is here. I get it. But Jake is also super strong. And these are really some of the top people that I think we have in the field. And not all of them, they're like maybe medium. They're not the old gods yet. They're on way to being these gods, but they're just like super active still. And they're looking for PhD students. And these are all the people that are also lose PhD students too. And I'm happy to send them to CMU and to UW. Like I've lost a few students to Jake Welbrock and James Fogarty, but that's not a loss. It's really good for the student. Anyway, so we have some questions here, I think, right? So maybe we should start taking one. I'll try to be a better moderator. I'll talk less and take more questions. Okay, it's okay for first-year student to join the lab and have some training and small projects. Yeah, I think actually this is what's a good way to plan to set yourself en route to a PhD? I think many of us will be in the master's program or in undergraduate, and then sometimes there's an option to do a master thesis, or in any case, labs are usually looking. I think both of you will be working with undergraduates and master students, right? You've been doing this for a while now. So we are usually very welcoming to these students and embed them in research, right? And I write a lot of letters every year for undergraduates and graduate students to PhD and master's applications.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So like, if you're interested in research, get involved and engaged as early as possible. So like, I did some independent study as an undergrad. And then once I joined Georgia Tech, I started working with 3 professors. Like I worked with Chris Ladantic and on kind of crowdsourcing civic engagement using like an app to record people's bicycle routes. And I work with Gregory Abeld on, like sensing and interaction techniques a little bit, also with his student Yang Cheng Zhang at that time. And also like Thad Stunner on like wearable computers for like order picking tasks. So I think those really helped kind of get me into learning about what is research and how to work with others and kind of how to do research. And that's probably how I got into the PhD programs. So I think definitely there are always a lot of opportunities. Maybe at first you will join some sort of a project to kind of help with specific parts of it. But over time, once you get more and more involved, you might be able to define your own project and kind of like lead your own project and etc. Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to see whether this is a question for Shu. Let's see. Hi, everyone. I am Pranjal Jain from India, interested to apply to PhD. I'm interested in the intersection of HCI and speculative design. So first of all, I think it's a great accomplishment to be able to formulate your interests. And there's a lot of challenges in how specific, am I using the right terms and labels? So I think you're doing a good job here. Wonder Shu. So the question is actually, I'm reaching out to different professors. If I'm reaching out to different professors, should I tell them to whom I have already applied or reached out?
I don't think you need to let the professors know that like to whom you have already reached out. I think in terms of reaching, I think it's always great to reach out to faculties before your application. And I would recommend like at least like skimming over their research interests and see whether they align with yours. And if you are really excited about their research area, and send out an email to them and mention that you are interested in applying for PhD and also interested in working with them. I've got some like emails that seem like they were just sent to a bunch of people. They like didn't. I would suggest like kind of customizing the email a bit to the research interest of the professor that they're sending this email to. And I don't think you need to mention who else you have sent that email.
Cool. Yeah, I think this comes up later in the process when professors are keen on selecting you and then they want to hear who they are competing with. Okay. Oh, you're talking to Jake Robrock and James Fogarty. Okay. Okay. Yeah, what do I do now? So, well, I'm not better than them, but you know, think about blah. I don't know. So that's later in the process. I think for now, don't. Actually, when it comes to emails, it's very important. A lot of things I feel like so one thing you should get really right, and we had an interesting discussion in my lab this morning. There's a lot of no-nos when it comes to writing emails. So I think first of all, you need to really make sure that you're addressing the professor in a respectful way, not too crazy, but respectful. So a common way to do it would be, the safe way is to write to Dear Dr. Anhong. And I don't care whether you have the doctor yet. I don't know what the current is, but or Dear Professor Anhong or Dear Professor Shu Wang. So that's how you should start it. And then I think I'm getting a lot of emails that look like spam. And I feel that way because they talk about fields that I really don't work in. And so I understand that you write, that's a lot of work to write to professors. But I also really feel like the only way it really makes sense to write to professors is you're working on an application towards a specific institution. And you really want to send this application, because like, what's the point of you writing an email and see whether they're interested, and then would you make a decision whether you apply based on whether the professor writes back to you or not? I wouldn't. But I think once you have your materials ready, you actually are in a good there's a good time frame. So actually the story is different when you are working with a professor. I think that's different, because then you should signal to them that you're interested in applying to PhD programs. This should be very early. But when you're applying elsewhere, then I think there's not a lot of value in sending out a lot of emails without actually a serious application. But once you have it, like you're really targeting UMich, for example, and you want to put down Anhong and Shu as potential advisors, then you should actually write to them and find out whether they're actually looking for PhD students. I think that's a good question, because you may be applying to people that are actually not actively looking for PhD students. And that's like that's not so good, because we will still handle it internally, but you're signaling people. So what happens is, like, if I see an application goes out to Anhong and Shu, and my mind is like, okay, they should deal with this application. They were mentioned, they seem to be the target of the application, so I won't deal with the application yet. And then sometimes what happens, like Anhong would reach out to me and say, hey, Michael, I think there's an interesting student here. Maybe we could co-supervise. They even mention you or somewhere in the text or something. I may have missed it. So this is like some of the stuff that happens behind the scenes. So who you mention in your application is very important. And when you do that, then I would really actually write an email, especially around the time you have applied. Because even when you have applied in December, the time we really look at things, they will be internally processed and released to us in January. And then we'll look at them. We have like 2 weeks to look at them. We usually delay interviews. We want everybody to give a chance to look at the applications. This is the stuff that is not written anywhere, so I'm just disclosing the process here. Within the 2 weeks, we coordinate among ourselves who we are starting to look at applications, who would we reach out to, who would we actually start interviewing. And then there is like a 2-week time where we actually want to interview people. And we want to be early so that we get to talk to people before they make their decisions. And I think most universities are around the same. So it's at the end of January, usually, when we start talking to PhD students, potentially incoming PhD students. And so it's very important who you mention. And I do already get quite a few emails right now, but the only thing I can say is whether I'm looking or not, because I'm not actually evaluating any applications right now, because I don't know that you're actually really applying. And so why would I spend the effort on it now? Sometimes I do give feedback on applications when I think the tone is really wrong, or I need to talk about applications. One more thing I promised I would do. I'll phrase it as a question because I want to bring in you two. So let's say you get an application from a student and they're really engaged in early research, like what we just saw to GL, get involved in research. So let's say you have maybe 1 or 2 submissions in progress. or maybe they're already published. How important is it to you in your, when you evaluate applications, that the student already has a publication?
Yeah, let me talk about that and add to a bit more about the application process. So like, I think it generally is true what you said. So like, I was on the HCI PhD admissions committee last year, and kind of that was almost similar to process. And one thing that like kind of I was not aware of a lot, and I kind of feel that's very true, is even if your interest matches with a professor really well, like from the committee's perspective, or people reading the application, or you might know, but if you didn't put their name, then even if they are recruiting students, maybe like the match will not be established. So like you will not get an offer. So that would be a missed opportunity. So I would say put as many names as possible. I mean, with the caveat of don't put like 3 rows of like 20 names of I'm interested in working with A, B, C, D, F, G, like, but do, if there are actually like a ton of people you want to work with, I think it is reasonable to reach out in advance and ask them whether they will be kind of recruiting students, and then you will have, put maybe like 5 names or something like that on your application. That seems to be a good strategy. And one more thing is, I think having a website is super helpful. Like nothing fancy. It doesn't need to have like, all the fancy animations and, 5 tabs or something. Just use a one-pager. There are tons of examples on the web. Feel free to kind of, if you're interested in mine, feel free. I also kind of use the similar template and, borrow a lot of things from Michael Bernstein's website. So like, feel free to use, download the source code and make changes to it, or like see other people's changes. And I mean, people use different styles, like using WordPress or using Weebly and many other websites, or you can just use Bootstrap to build your own. So yeah, so that's another advice. So Michael, could you repeat your question real quick? I think I missed that one.
So application wise, yeah, a good point about the website. When you follow a template like this, it's hard. Like, what would you put here? You don't have 50 best papers, so you're not Michael Bernstein yet. Yeah, I think you could pick the 1 or 2 research projects that you are working on and spend just more time on, actually not quantity matters at this stage. It's really important to hear about your experiences working on a specific project. So maybe having like a video prototype or something here. There's an interesting question related to that, which I should almost go into, but I forgot. I asked you how important you think papers are. So Anhong, you had your chance.
Yeah.
How important are papers to you in applications?
One thing to add to that. So basically, when I applied, I didn't have any publication, and I had maybe 1 or 2 in submission at the time, but both were rejected, by the time my application went in. So I personally think it really doesn't, so it's the full package. It's not about you have 1 paper or you have 2 papers, 1 first author or whatever, then you get in. That's not true. It's like really the full package. Your CV is sort of important because that's the first thing people look at, but your personal statement is super important because that details what you actually did. Maybe there's like a best paper award you had and you're like 5th author. What did you actually do? So the statement of purpose is the place where you write about that and talk about like your contribution and what do you think about it and how do you want to extend it forward. So I think that extended forward, like what you want to do in the future, is almost as important as what you have done before. And the recommendation letters would be the people that you worked with, and they will kind of talk about their experience working with you. So like everything is coherent. So like, they will be talking about they will be supporting the parts that you wrote about of what you did with them. And, they will be commenting from their perspective and angle. So I think as long as you have maybe some experience or working on different projects and demonstrate your problem solving skills and experience, that should be good. So publication is not a requirement, at least when I applied. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I do think that some of you who may have been involved in a few more projects Don't just list out the projects. Each of these objects need to be treated like an important thing. And the one thing I said, so I had an application recently from a student. They were just listing out papers, but they didn't actually indicate the authorship. And so it wasn't clear what the involvement of the student was. It's unlikely that an undergraduate student is like pushing out 3 papers. So it was a little, and the other thing, I think the student was obviously very proud of their papers, but I think like from my perspective, and that's actually a really important thing, maybe I should mention here. So Anhong, you said your papers were rejected. So you mark them as in submission. And you don't pay attention to blind or whatnot. Talal was asking whether you just put in the real names. There's no conflict of interest with you putting in your application a paper that's in submission to a conference. That is not breaching any anonymity or anything like that. You shouldn't think about that. This is really important. This is your application. So you put in the stuff and you say whether it's in submission or not. And if they end up to be a reviewer, that is for the professor to handle. So the question here was, what is the standard practice to mention blind review papers of Chi and CSW in grad school applications? And my answer is, you just mention them with the correct author names and order, and you say when it was reviewed and it's going to appear, you say to appear, and otherwise you just say in submission to this conference, and you actually say to which conference. You don't not say to Chi, because you actually want to talk about your experience working on this paper.
Yeah,
and you just include it in the CV.
And I would also say, maybe just ask your faculty advisor whether it's okay to talk about it, because especially, for example, if you did an internship at a super secretive team at Apple, and they don't allow you to talk about it until the moment it's published, then you probably can put it on in the application. But don't breach those kind of confidentiality agreements. But otherwise, generally, I would say if you work in the research lab and you submit a paper, it's okay to share.
Good point. I see Shu is taking notes here for us, I think. Super nice. And that's not how I wanted it to be. Shu, I want you to get a question. So hang on, we talked about applications, papers. I think Shu would agree with, I guess, what we said, right? Papers don't matter that much. The experience matters.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with it. Yeah, I think it's like publication is not a end goal. It's just a way to show you have some research experience. And if you can demonstrate your experience and your training in research through other ways, that would all count.
Cool. So here we have a question. Let's see who can take this one. I wanted to know if it's a good option to apply for masters and do a thesis at the iSchool, get to know the professors at the same place, build a rapport with them, and then eventually continue the thesis topic maybe to PhD. So how do you think about that question? It could be CSE as well as iSchool. It doesn't matter.
So I think it depends on what kind of master program that is. I'm not very familiar with the master's program at Michigan yet, but I can talk about the master's program at CMU. So like at CMU HCI, there are 2 master's programs. One is Master in HCI, the other is METALS program, Masters in Education Technology and Applied Learning Sciences. So for the MHCI program, that is a very professional training program. Like students were trained to be UX designers or interaction designers afterwards. I've seen very few cases of transferring to PhD programs after that program, because you'll be very busy with doing like more practice-based training and stuff during the program. But for the METALS program, there were like some cases of students in the METALS program pursuing a PhD afterwards, because there were some like coursework that's on research methods, and they're in that program. So I think it depends on whether the program is more like practice driven or research driven. And also I think you will get a lot of opportunities to get like independent studies and research experience during a master's program. Yeah, I think if you are not sure about whether you want to pursue a PhD yet, because this is kind of a long time and effort commitment. I think doing a master's first to see whether you're interested, you're excited about doing research, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. There is this idea of building rapport with the advisor. I do think so. It's very important when I write letters for students. It's very important to me that I can actually write something about their research experience, not just like I know they're a student from my course and they did a really good job and they got an A+ or A. Then and a student asked me, can you write a strong letter for me? Then I would say I can write a very positive letter, but I cannot write a strong letter because I cannot comment on your research experience. And it's actually often a result of how professional our program is. Now in our program here in the masters, you actually have an option to do a master thesis. You always, I guess, everywhere have an option to do an independent study that you could design a little bit more research oriented. And in the worst case, you could still use any of your capstone or any kind of projects that you've worked on and emphasize some research parts of it. Or like, I mean, there's a story behind each of us why we are interested in applying to a PhD. And I think I would emphasize that story then. If you don't have a lot to show and tell yet in terms of like, I have X submissions to this conference, which I don't think is the strongest. I just want to make it very clear. A lot of us are probably thinking, so there are students in the pool that have 2 or 3 publications, or at least in submission. But I don't think of them, I wouldn't necessarily rank them higher in my mind than somebody who is in the process of working on this project or getting experience with this professor and we haven't made it to submission yet. And you know what I would actually rank the highest is the student that has been working on a research project and even a paper and whose paper was rejected, because that student will have gone through that whole, the PhD is like this, and they will have been at the low and they will have had to recover from the low to actually regain, they should not give up on their research. They actually have to get up again and try to submit it again. And when you have been there, then I think that is one of the most valuable experiences you can have, because PhD is a lot about rejection, unfortunately. And in many ways is a much stronger application to me than somebody who has 3 successfully published papers. I feel like, okay, they haven't seen the real world yet. But it's still, it raises more questions in my mind than it is actually a strength. And so emphasize the story behind any project you're doing, maybe demonstrate awareness, talk about things that were rejected or are in submission, don't just ignore them. Don't think like you can't talk about it unless they're obviously like regulatory rules that Anhong was talking about. Check with your advisors what they are comfortable with you revealing. The advisor often has the best gut feeling for that. So find that advisor and mentor. I think let's finish that block around application. Maybe not yet. Okay, statement of purpose. We have one here. I'm going to read out the question. How specific does one have to be in their statement of purpose for PhD applications about the area of research if one has a broader publication track record like computer vision, natural language processing, and human-computer interaction? What do you think?
I can go. I think definitely mention your research interest for sure. Even if you're like, for example, if you're interested in computer vision, LP, and HCI, if you don't say anything, if you just say I'm interested in computer science, that's definitely a bad sign. But if you just say I'm interested in all of these areas, that also might raise some questions. So I would suggest like you need to first think about what you want. Like what do you want to do? Like if you are most interested in computer vision and you have done some work in NLP and HCI, or if you're most interested in HCI and you have done some work in vision and NLP, then use those as supporting pillars to demonstrate like how those experiences help you do HCI research, or the other way around. and how do you want to apply those in the future? Or maybe you want to say, I want to be contributing in this intersection and also contributing in the individual areas. So those will help a lot, I feel. Yeah. Yeah. And a quick thing to add to the previous question, and added a note about, like, I had a great experience doing the master's at Georgia Tech, and it's a 2-year program, and course load is not super heavy. So I got a lot of time to do research, and that was super helpful. So like basically, if you're not sure what exactly you want to do, or like if you're not sure whether you want to do, I mean, not really exactly what I want to do, because now I'm not even sure what exactly I want to do yet. But like if you are having the question of should I do a PhD, then getting more exposure and experience to help you kind of make that decision is important, because you are committing 5 or 6 years of your life on this PhD thing. So having more evidence, or be more informed of whether or not you want to do this and what you want to get out of this, talk to people is very helpful.
Cool. I actually, this is a little late, but I didn't agree so much with the suggestion of listing 5 faculty before, because to me, it doesn't actually make it clearer what you're interested in. It seems like you're all over the place. I felt like that when I read some applications in the past. So there's really this interesting balance to signal to a good number of people that you really would like to work with them, but also not appear like all over the place. So somebody who has worked on computer vision, NLP, and HCI, like I feel like the common intersection point should be HCI, because that's what I'm doing. So if you're applying with me, you need to tell me that you have this really cool, interesting technical background. So I'm very excited to work with you. AR, VR, lots of interesting things there. It's not the only things we can do, by the way, not just the technical stuff, but I think that goes to Anhong's point. It's like the story and giving specific examples. So the answer to the question was, you have to be quite specific, and actually more specific than just listing out. You shouldn't list out research disciplines. Like each of these are actually disciplines. HCI, computer vision, NLP, they have their own sets of conferences. So you're talking about hundreds, thousands of researchers that you're aligned with. And so I think many of us say, I'm working at the intersection of, and then one is HCI, and then the other thing is something else. Maybe Anhong says human AI or UbiComp, I don't know what you would currently say. How human AI has that built-in idea of HCI, maybe that's the way it is. Anyway, I think you should give more specific research topics that you're interested in, not just like. So for example, in computer vision, I'm particularly excited about the potential of its applications to augmented reality and virtual reality. So I've done this project with my advisor and a team of 2 undergraduates. And my role in this project was really, I implemented all the hard parts in C#, like really the difficult things. And I'm very proud of that. I feel like I've learned a lot, blah, 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 blah. That reads like, oh, has experience, understands their role on the team, describes the relationship to the advisor. I really learn a lot that way. Talking about challenges and how you have overcome them, I think is very interesting. So I think we are there. So here's another question. Oh, there was more to it. Sorry, I only read the first. No, okay, I'm highlighting only the first one. This is actually a multi-block question. So although this is my current scenario, I feel this applies to many international students in the US. I want to apply for a PhD for fall 2020, I guess fall 2021. But I might need to start a job in December for socioeconomic conditions currently. Okay, so basically the question is like, would like to apply for a PhD, doing a job in the meantime. Can I start working at a lab with a professor as an employee before I start PhD in fall 2020? So basically you have a job, you're asking whether you can work with a professor while you have a job and you have already graduated from your previous university.
I think it's possible to do it, although you definitely want to check with your employer whether like there's any exclusive agreement, like any time that you spend on the laptop using their Wi-Fi, or using any equipment might compromise the IP. So I think that's the main issue. But if you kind of separate it really well, like, you do the work 9 to 5, and then, during the night you work on research, it's tough to do. I don't super recommend it, but if, that can work out. Yeah. And just to clarify, I agree with Michael's point earlier, rejecting my earlier point, is that like just listing 5 people that you're interested in is not a great idea. It's like, for example, if you really need to know why you have a good match with them if there are multiple people, but don't leave good people that you feel you could work with out. And I feel there might be a difference here compared to like individual faculty admitting students versus a committee admitting students, because in the CME HCI, we had a committee evaluating these applications. So basically, like, if we see someone mention someone else, a faculty's name, and that faculty might be recruiting students, then we will forward those applications to the faculty, so they will do the evaluation and the ranking. So if a person didn't put their name, then the faculty will not see the application unless they look specifically. Like, maybe if you contact them before, that helps. But if you put like 10 people from 3 departments, that doesn't really help. So yeah, definitely you need to find good match, and but don't leave great people out. Yeah, if it is a good match.
I think this maybe Sunny can speak up. I think they might be asking whether they can work with the professor as the job, right? Like, can I start working at a lab with the professor as an employee, because kind of they need to find a job. They were asking whether they can find this job with the professor.
Okay, so that depends again on the university. Yeah. So I cannot actually, like, I cannot just hire people directly out of industry without actually announcing a job and going through a fair application process. I think there are some, oh, you want to raise your hand? Okay, so feel free to unmute yourself, by the way, if you wanted to ask directly.
Yeah. Hi, professors. Yeah, thank you so much. This is an amazing event. Yeah, the thing is, I don't want to go to industry. I'm too scared of going into industry. I'm in the research world. I'm doing masters in HCI. I've been working on 2 research for NSF funded projects for the past 1.5 years, which is related to design for social accessibility and design for imperfect AI systems for DHS users. So is there a chance that I can directly start working with a professor instead of finding a job in the industry?
Mm-hmm. Okay, we got the question wrong then. Okay, so basically you would be doing an internship and you would expect pay. You would probably, so the pay will be an issue because it may not match your industry expectations in the research environment. There may not be funding sometimes.
It wouldn't be, Professor, it wouldn't be about the pay, it would be about the legal status of me. That would be the big issue.
Okay, and those questions I would really just defer to people that really understand how visas work. I'm very reluctant. I've been subject to H-1B and other things before. And I've also had a student that really wanted me to certify that I employ them. And it's just like a letter that I technically cannot provide. That's like a Michigan administration, and there's a whole HR process behind it that I don't understand. And so the things we could comment on is like whether we would be open to doing this. And I feel like I've had examples like this in the past. I've had people that actually were on a job and they were not so happy. So they took 1 day a week off to work in my lab. I've had summer interns come to my lab. I'm not sure I had people bridge. Yeah, I had people stay on after they graduated. So I already had a relationship with them. And then they stayed 1 or 2 months in my lab and then they started something else. So all these scenarios are possible. From an administration, from a legal and visa status perspective, I have no idea. I always said that's the task of the student to figure that out. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it will be a little complicated now. Like, I think before, for these type of visas, it might be J1 visa as like a visiting student or a visiting researcher. But I don't know. I think for now it might be very difficult to obtain those like visas right now.
Okay, so we have even more questions. So I'm going to throw a few out of them. Tala asks, is a PhD from a Cse Department or from an Ischool the only path to becoming an industry researcher or to getting an industry researcher position. In general, I think most of these people working in industrial research labs actually have PhDs. So I'm not sure it's the only path like these two programs, but in general, I think you probably need to have a PhD to work in an industrial research position. Is that right? Do you think it's right?
So for industry research, I think there's like research scientist and also user researcher, user experience researcher at like Facebook, Instagram. I think they have lots of those. Like
they're not academic,
experience,
they're just UX research, yeah.
Yeah, UX researcher. So some of those, they do not require a PhD.
Okay. Here's another question. How important is one's GRE score when applying for HCI PhD? As most of the schools are making GRE score more optional. If I don't submit my GRE score, then would my application have less weight?
For CSE, I think they removed the requirement of GRE score this year. And I think they were talking about just not showing GRE score completely in the application page to not disadvantage those who do not submit a GRE score. So like whether you submit or not, people will not see whether you submit or not. But I don't know whether it applies to other places.
Okay, yeah, same for us. I don't think, so if it's not required and you like, if you're doing really well on the test and you feel like you paid for it and because you used it for the other applications, like if you have it, I think you could still submit it. To be honest, I have never looked at, I don't even know how to read those. It's not something I grew up with in that I cared. I don't even know how it's computed or done. Same with grades, like GPAs. The student asked me this morning whether I saw that we were discussing an applicant to our lab, whether I saw the GPA, and I was like, no. So I don't know. So here's a question, and actually I don't understand the question, but I'll just read it out. Would a student come in with a wide range of research background to explore research interests and attempt to formulate good research ideas, but without a direct publication in top tier conferences like CHI or CSCW, be desk rejected, low ranked? That is a question. The answer is no, right? We unanimously agree. Okay, we talked about this, so don't worry about it, but still highlight your interest. You should be able to tell us what you're interested in and maybe give some examples of what you have done in this direction, even if it's not a paper. Some applications require a distinct statement of purpose and research statement. So personal statement and research statement. How do I minimize their overlap? What would be meaningful to add to the statement of purpose? So I have one idea here. So in the research statement, you really focus on the work that you have done and what motivated you professionally to do it. And then in the more personal statement, you could talk more about why, what got you into the PhD and what you could imagine doing after the PhD. Like, why do you actually want to do a PhD? And you could still refer to examples between both statements. Normally so the one thing I would avoid in a personal statement is to write these things that they always publish when it comes to my child was accepted to all top tier Harvard, Cornell, whatever. They always have this essay that is like a TED style talk. It's like, when I was young, my daddy once told me, and he gave me this stuffed animal, and that really inspired me to do research. They seem to be crafted rather than actually really interesting and meaningful. So what I would really recommend is you just be yourself and you just talk about yourself and tell us what motivates you to actually spend more time on research. For example, if you're coming out of a job, it might be interesting to learn why you think, how you plan to grow in your personal statement. I think we talked a lot about the professional statement before. Would you want to add something to this?
I guess your point is really valid. Yeah, I'm Kritika, by the way.
Hello.
So, hi. Thank you for your response. So my interest is in the field of ethical AI and working with privacy and transparency and fairness. So I do have motivation. I do have a strong motivation on why I want to work in that area, but I'm just scared it might come off as a little generic.
Okay, I mean, it's cool to me that you can be that specific. I'm sure Anhong just raised his ears. And did you say, okay, ethical? Okay, AI, that's me. That's good. So in that sense, you're already sending the right signals. And then I guess in the personal statement, really make it less focused around the research examples and the research directions. And you should still talk about professional growth, but it's like a different perspective. It's more like how you as a person plan to grow and what you plan to learn and the more personal stuff. Sometimes actually students reveal the most traumatizing stories. In some sense, they would almost require trigger warnings. I've read really, really, really sad, really personal statements. I felt really horrible after reading some of them. And that's a decision you can make. I think financial hardship or personal hardship is something that especially seems very common in the master's applications. Students often talk about this because the question is whether there will be a scholarship or not. In the PhD program, I feel like I would really like to learn more how you see yourself, where you're coming from, and the vector is around you. I think that is it's still abstract, I understand, but the other thing is get feedback from your advisors. Like if you're working with a mentor, if you haven't done a research project, it's straightforward, right? You've done a research project in a lab or something, so you work with a professor. If you haven't done that yet and you're really applying to PhD and you're still enrolled in a program, find somebody that you think you know from a class or somebody, and you tell them, I'm really excited applying to PhD programs. Could you give me some feedback? And most professors would be willing to actually give you feedback. I think this kind of mentorship is very important for some of the applications. And the other thing is the personal statement is personal, so I'm not sure whether you would want to ask your friends to read it and give you feedback on it, but maybe the ones that you really trust could also be a good source of feedback.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think it's okay to be general in kind of the direction your life want to be, like what kind of motivation you have and things like that. But when talking about your project, be very specific, and then kind of expand from that project. You can go more general, and then go like more specific and more general. Kind of that could be a good way of demonstrating you have specific things and evidence. At the same time, you're thinking big and more general. Yeah. Oh, one quick note is about recommendation letters. I just thought about this. I think it's always good to ask a professor whether, the way to ask them, I think, could be, would you have time to write a letter, or if you really know this person and you think it's appropriate, I think it's okay to even ask would they be able to write you a good letter, because you give them some reason potentially to say no. Then if they don't think they can write you a good letter, then you probably don't want their letter and you're not wasting their time. So I think it's a mutual benefit to just be more direct and transparent, in my opinion. I got that advice when I applied earlier before.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. We had one more about taking a break during the PhD, for example, in the middle of a PhD. So this, I'm not exactly sure administratively, but there are always reasons for mental health or for family or professional development, or there could be lots of reasons for this. Normally there are mechanisms built into PhD programs to support breaks. Normally, I would say faculty advisors should be supportive of this. I would like the earlier you know, the better, I think. It is interesting. It is something that should be supported. And I think most universities are getting much better when it comes to this flexibility and diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's what I would say. But there might be caveats to it. I'm not sure whether you could do a 2-year break in a PhD program. I'm not sure what it means visa status wise. I don't know all of these things. So take my answer with a grain of salt. I just feel a 2-year break is a pretty long break, to be honest. So like if it's a planned 2-year break, then yeah, I can foresee some challenges there as well. But breaks, I mean, I've had a student on a break once, and that was a good thing for the student. And these things are important. Okay, so we are kind of wrapping up here. We're getting a few thank yous. Okay, here's one. Hey, here's one. Maybe I'll throw at you, Shu or Anhong. Actually, maybe Anhong. How important is working on the algorithmic aspect of tasks or information systems when you're doing technical HCI research? Does using off-the-shelf algorithms hurt chances of getting into industry? Okay, would like to know about some of the industry roles after PhD in technical HCI research. It's our last question of the day.
I think so. On HCI side, in terms of algorithm, like actually we would prefer to use off-the-shelf algorithms. Like on the one hand, if there are already off-the-shelf algorithms, they're written better and like they run faster than the algorithms that we would write ourselves. And also these algorithms would be considered more accessible for like a lot of application domains. So like my research, if I need to use some algorithms, I would want to check whether there are off-the-shelf algorithms that would solve my problems. But if there or like I could combine different algorithms together to solve like a problem. I think that for HCI contribution, like inventing a new algorithm or like improving the performance of a particular algorithm isn't considered as a HCI contribution. So, and in terms of getting into industry, I also don't think that would be a problem. I think even in some research labs industry, they would also prefer to use off-the-shelf algorithms because they were more robust. Yeah, that's my understanding.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And just, I think it also depends on the contribution you want to be making or you're comfortable making. Like, for example, if you're a very strong, system builder and also algorithm, designer, then you can be publishing or contributing to both areas for sure. But I don't think there is like, you have one type of work is more superior than the other, or like one is more, appealing or something like that. Yeah, it's just depending on like, what problem you want to solve and what's the best way of solving that problem, and why you are, potentially the best person of solving this problem. That's kind of matters more. And I agree totally that, in industry and not specifically for research, but for like just working at companies and trying to build up products, like off-the-shelf algorithms are the best. They like, that if they can use something that is already out there, is well known and things like that, it's much better than kind of coming up with your own. Yeah. But while oftentimes I think the HCI contribution in terms of like algorithm aspect is also when you are trying to use an existing algorithm to solve a specific problem, it doesn't get you all the way there. So you will need to kind of, tune it in a way where, introduce other techniques or invent some new techniques on top of it to get you actually there. And this is basically like, can be your core contribution. Yeah.
Cool. You took my favorite question in such a nice way. So I did respond to Siddhartha's question around what to put in the CV and not. I think, yeah, so I'll just leave it there. Anything else you feel like we want to, so let's wrap up, and any messages we want to send out, personal or otherwise, to anybody else who sees it? Do you feel like we covered quite a bit? There are lots of other things we talked about. So what do we talk about? Rankings, finding people, writing statements, both professional and the personal statement. We talked about that. What else did we talk about? Some more specific, how to bridge from industry to research, what it takes.
People.
Mailing people, we talked about mailing people. I was on a rant there, trying to give some advice. We talked about industrial research positions. So not everybody needs to be a faculty or professor after the PhD. This idea of doing a PhD only if you want to be a professor, that's not right. PhD is primarily in education. I think you'll grow a lot as a person. You'll be both more self-critical and you'll get better at handling other people's criticism, which I'm not sure. Is there a better environment than our cute little academic bubble for this? Yeah, so I don't know, there's a fly here. I guess it wants me to stop. This is the Mike Pence fly. Kidding. Anyway, so anything from you? Any last words?
I guess that's all. And I think if there are other questions, feel free to put in the doc or like, highlight them some way. And I probably will jump onto this doc and see whether there are questions that I can quickly answer as well. Yeah. And that's a good way of crowdsourcing these questions. 50
more questions that we have already answered. I think the document is getting quite long now. Shu, by the way, thanking for the initiative of continuing this document for us. So we have a document, updated document even out of this. The document is actually shared on Twitter, but I can also post it here. Shu, any final words from you?
Yeah, I just have one final thing. For recommendation letters, ask early. Like if you're applying this talk, probably ask now. Like whoever you want, like start asking. Maybe like even you can start asking today.
Right. Recommendation letters, ask early. That's good. Yes, so this will be, as soon as I stop here, it'll be uploaded and processed, and then I'll share it again in the document. We'll probably tweet again about this. This was fun. Good luck, everybody. It's exciting to see people interested in PhDs and research. I've had students in the past that were reluctant to talk about it. It's very important that you send the right signals to the faculty that you work with already, or because the starting point is at home. And they can coach you. I mentor quite a few students through this process. It's part of my job. I enjoy it. And it's the same for Anhong and Shu here as well. And we don't know actually what is right? Nobody told me how my application was perceived, what they liked about it or hated. When you interview with me, I often do this like review of our interview experience and things you could improve when you talk to the next professor, because I do mock interviews sometimes with students as well. So I think this is an exciting time and could be potentially life-changing. I never regretted my PhD. I think it's actually a really good thing to do this. All right, then bye everybody. Thanks for coming.
Cool. Thanks everyone.
Okay,
Thanks,
cool.
everyone.
Bye-bye.